Hi there, my name is CJ Harris. I'm the Associate Youth Director here at Sammamish Presbyterian Church, and this is Ignite Online. We are in our series called Planting Faith, and today we're talking about being replanted. Do you remember those little seeds that we started with in this series? And we planted them and we saw the little sprouts? Well, newsflash, they outgrew them. So we need to replant them, which is really exciting because they get new homes and they're going to be awesome. And so we're going to talk about that transition period because I think we all go through a transition period, especially in our faith and in generally in life. But before we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about a story from my life. And that story starts with the job I had previously. So previously I was a kindergarten prep teacher and I worked with 4 to 5-year-olds and they were super cute. They would learn how to write their name. That was like the hardest thing, was getting them to write their name. And learning about counting and money and even learning the days of the week by singing. It was quite a job. But I would take my lunch hour in my car just for some peace and quiet, some fresh air. I would watch the birds and I would just take some time to relax and be rejuvenated so that way I could be the best teacher for them after lunch. So during those times I would typically pray or listen to a sermon or call a friend, something that would just help. And during one of my prayer times in my car, during that lunch hour, I distinctly heard God's voice, just that Holy Spirit nudge, and it was this: don't get too comfortable, be ready to move. In that moment, I was like, wait, what? I'd only been at that job for a few months, and I was liking it. I mean, it wasn't the goal. My goal was not to be a kindergarten prep teacher. My goal was to be in youth ministry, but I just couldn't find a job in my area. Well, when I heard that from God, I took that as a little sign to just look, to see what's out there for youth ministry jobs. And sure enough, this job was posted, and I applied. I took that as, okay, I think God might be calling me out of this and into the job that I've been dreaming about. And sure enough, here we are. But that word, don't get too comfortable, be ready to move. I think that is very simply being replanted, is it not? And there might be times in your life where you're being replanted. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, we're also finishing up Abraham's story. If we go back to the other episodes, we've learned a lot about Abraham's story, especially before the calling on Abraham's life. But today we're going to go into his calling, and really right after he loses his dad and probably takes that time to grieve and lament, God's next words for Abraham are go. Go into the land that I've promised you. You're going to be the father of many nations. Like this just big old calling on his life. Which Abraham was like, what? A father of many nations? Like my wife can't have children. So there's some doubt. But he did go. He did go to the land that God told him to. He was all up for that. And we find his story in Genesis 12 through 22, the continuation of it anyway. And we find that he had to uproot his comfort, the settling down in Haran. He had to uproot everything in order to go. And I mean, they were there for quite a while, so they had a bunch of livestock. They had a lot of help with that livestock. They just accumulated a lot of stuff that they had to travel with, and they did that. And Lot grew up. Lot was his nephew, and he ended up having his own wealth. And they had a lot of stuff. They didn't travel lightly. They had a lot. But we find out that even Lot, because he had so much stuff, he couldn't travel with Abraham anymore. They decided to part ways because their their people weren't getting along super well, and so they just decided, you know what, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe they've outgrown that space, right? Replanted, so Lot went on his way and he settled in a different land. And then Abraham and Sarah continue on their journey, and Abraham gets scared of the Egyptians and what they might do to Sarah, so they pretend to be brother and sister. I don't know why. I don't know why that was the first inclination, but again, they had doubts, I think, about God's plan, and they tried to, make their own way, and we do too sometimes, and sometimes that doesn't work out so well. But luckily for them, being brother and sister, they eventually were able to get out of Egypt and keep going because they did not want to get stuck there. And they continued on, and God told Abraham and Sarah that they would have a child, and they were like, what? Because Sarah couldn't have children, and Abraham was 100 and Sarah was 90 when they had Isaac, and they laughed so hard at God they couldn't believe it, which is why Isaac's name is Isaac, because it means like he laughs. Fitting, right? Well, before they got pregnant, though, they had a lot of, again, more doubts, and they tried to make their own way, and Sarah told Abraham to have Hagar and them to have a child because maybe this will be it. Again, it's messy, right? It's totally messy. And so are our lives. We're not perfect. We hardly get things right sometimes, and yet God still makes his plan and his purpose prevail, which is really, really encouraging. Even through our human error, God still does wonders, and that's because God is God, and we are not. Praise the Lord. But their imperfections actually just show how good God is, which is quite incredible. And as they go on this process, Isaac has children, and Abraham does become the father of many nations. And it is quite a beautiful story, and it's really difficult. I won't talk about the, Abraham having to almost sacrifice Isaac. It was crazy. Again, Genesis 12-22. Read it. It's not perfect. It's not messy, and we get that because our lives are not perfect. And it is messy. I meant to say that it is messy. But this is a good question for us. What have you outgrown? Where do you think God might be preparing you to go next? And where maybe have you gotten a little too comfortable? Well, talking to my incoming 8th grader, or my incoming 9th graders, my 8th graders right now, you're going to have to move to high school. God is preparing you for that. And you're about to outgrow middle school. And that's okay. That's actually a good thing. And that's kind of scary. You're being replanted, and that's going to be a transition. And you are not alone in that transition. There's teachers, you've got your church family, you've got your small group leaders, you got your parents, you got your sports, hopefully, or an extracurricular activity that can help you make those transitions easier. Also, friends are really helpful. They make it so much easier to walk into that big old school. And then my incoming 5th graders, who are going to be 6th graders, they outgrew elementary school, and now they got to go to middle school, and it's like a whole new world. And we outgrow the pots that we were planted in, and now we have to keep growing so we can maximize our full potential. What other things might you be outgrowing? What do you think God might be preparing you for? I know it's a big question, but I want you to think about it, and here are some ways that we can think about it together. Maybe it's opening up to your family about how you're actually doing. Maybe you're struggling with depression and anxiety through this time of quarantine, and you really need your parents to know that you're really struggling, and maybe it's being vulnerable to tell them. Yeah, and Trust me, I was a kid that held it in. I stuffed all of my emotions in, and it didn't do me any bit of good. And so maybe getting the courage to say something to your family of saying, I need some help, I need some extra help, so that way you can grow. So maybe that's one. Maybe two, maybe it's not judging others or not being quick to judge. Sometimes we can see somebody, maybe look at the clothes that they're wearing or the way that, I don't know, what they're wearing. I don't know. We judge people for a lot of different reasons. And maybe we're being way too quick to judge. And maybe we need to give them a second or third chance or a fourth chance. Because if we were all judged based on first impressions, I don't know if we would all have a lot of friends. People give us second chances, and we maybe need to as well. Maybe we need to outgrow that mindset of you think one way and that's the only way. Maybe we need to expand and open up our minds about people, especially. Maybe you actually have outgrown your clothes and you need to make some donation piles. And maybe God's asking you to be a little generous in this time. And so that could be a way. Maybe you're just gotten really comfortable in your clothes. I don't know. You know what I mean. And then, what else? Maybe it's getting off your screen and making space for God to speak to you in the silence, especially right now. And it's uncomfortable to sit with God in silence sometimes, but maybe that's exactly where you need to be so you can replant. And maybe it's finding a new friend. I know you're still doing school online, and maybe it's reaching out to someone you don't normally talk to and just checking in. And that could be a bit uncomfortable, but it also might be a way for you to grow and expand. Being uncomfortable in our faith challenges us to expand our roots of kindness, compassion, and generosity. And I encourage you to find one way to expand your roots. And really, that is such a beautiful thing. And it's okay to be replanted. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. We have doubts. We question everything. And we wonder about everything. But it's okay. God is with you. God's plan always prevails. Even when we try to take matters into our own hands, God's plan is still in the midst. And He's always thinking about you. And you don't ever have to worry about being alone in that. So again, being uncomfortable in our faith challenges us to expand our roots of kindness, compassion, and generosity. Find one way to practice expanding your roots. It's okay to be replanted. Thanks for watching. I hope that you come back for next week. We'll see you later. Bye.